Good evening, boxing fans, and welcome back. Am I the only one who remembers when the great Larry Merchant compared a younger Cristobal Arreola to a younger version of Riddick Bowe?
Since we first saw him 3 years ago, thinking then, could this be the great American hope who goes to a Klitschko not to die? Like Riddick Bowe, Arreola is a plus-size heavyweight with smaller heavyweight skills. That doesn't count the diligence and the discipline that normally go with a championship-level fighter. He sort of jiggles in places that he shouldn't jiggle in, but he has an aggressive pressure style.
This is Rummy's Corner. So with the whole debacle between Deontay Wilder and Povetkin and all that's going on with that, when it became obvious that Deontay Wilder was going to take a fight while that whole thing was getting sorted out, and when it was announced that Chris Arreola was going to be his opponent, it actually reminded me of a situation from the past involving Arreola. And at this time, Arreola was preparing to take on Jameel McCline. And Jameel McCline was an older heavyweight at this point, and most people figured he was too old and too past it to give Arreola much trouble in this one. But I had never been sold on Chris Arreola myself at that time. I thought he was getting a lot of hype from HBO. I didn't think he was necessarily as good or as polished as many seemed to think. I actually thought McCline had a real live chance in that one, and I picked McCline to beat Chris Arreola. And of course I was wrong. All the people that said McCline was too old and too past it and that Arreola was a little bit better than I was giving him credit for, all of that was true. But the situation now, with Arreola challenging Deontay Wilder, it reminds me of the same situation. I think Arreola has a much better chance than many people seem to believe. And most people believe this is the type of fight that's going to wind up being a walk in the park for Deontay Wilder. But I don't think that's true. And before I go any further, let me put all my cards on the table here. When it comes to Deontay Wilder, I have picked against him twice. The first time I picked against him was when he faced the White Wolf, Sergey Lihovich. And I thought just with Lihovich's background that he would be the kind of guy that could really test Wilder, and I was wrong. Wilder scored an impressive knockout where he put on a frightening display of power. And he stopped Lihovich in the first round of that one. And that proved to me that his power, which I was never short on, I always believed that Wilder had legit power. Wilder's power was never a question, but it reaffirmed the sense that he had good power. To me, though, it still left a lot of unanswered questions. And the other time I picked against Wilder was when he challenged Stavern for the WBC championship. I thought Stavern still is probably the only really good name on Wilder's resume. I thought Stavern would be too much for him, and that's the fight where I really had to reevaluate where Deontay Wilder is. I still think he's a work in progress. I still think he has potential, but there are flaws in his game that I think other fighters can exploit. To date, nobody has exploited it, and Wilder right now, Arreola will be his fourth title defense. Last year, he had fought, I think it was in June, when he'd taken on Eric Molina in his first title defense. Wilder would go on to score a 9th round stoppage in that one. And I think it was September of last year when he took on Johan Duopa. That's another fight that Wilder won inside the distance. This one was an 11th round stoppage. And then earlier this year, Wilder had the third defense of his WBC crown when he stopped Spilka inside the distance. That was the 9th round of that fight, I think. So 3 fights in a row, 3 stoppage victories in a row. Most people assume that Arreola will be number 4. But will he? I know that Arreola is the kind of guy that's often fell short on expectations, and a lot of observers will point to his lack of discipline as one of the main culprits for all of the shortcomings in his career to date. But Arreola was always the kind of guy, going back to what Larry Merchant said in that opening clip I showed, he was always an aggressive pressure type fighter. And that's the type of fighter I still believe is the type that can cause Deontay Wilder problems. And I think we've seen some evidence of this in the past. But with Arreola, I mean, personally, I don't think Arreola has been really motivated since that rematch with Stiverne. And I know many of you will point out that he lost the fight to Stiverne and was stopped in the 6th round. And that's all true, and that was the second time he lost to Stiverne. But in those earlier rounds of that fight, Arreola was performing very well. Perhaps the best he had performed ever, or at the very least since his fight with Vitaly Klitschko several years earlier. So, since that point though, since that loss to Stiverne, Arreola hasn't looked particularly good. In the main fight, his most recent fight against Kaufman, that was a fight where originally, I think it was majority decision, a controversial majority decision for Arreola that was later changed to a no contest, I think after Arreola tested positive for marijuana. But looking at that Kaufman fight, and I know it wasn't Arreola's greatest performance, but in the first 6 rounds, and I know he was dropped and he was dropped hard in the 3rd round, but during the first 6 rounds, I saw enough of that style that Larry Merchant mentioned. Enough of that aggression and pressure that I think Arreola is being sold a little short going into his bout with Wilder. Am I saying that Arreola is definitely going to go out there? No. But I think he has a good chance of testing Wilder. And I think he is going to test Wilder because, if nothing else, it'll give Wilder the chance to prove that he could deal better with Arreola's type of style than he may have shown us so far to this point. Now, at any point during this fight, when you're facing a guy like Deontay Wilder, he obviously has the power to stop the fight. But for Chris to win this fight, especially considering the Kaufman fight and considering his history, I really don't think Chris is going to win a decision against Wilder no matter what. So I look at the first 6 rounds of that Kaufman fight, and those are the rounds that I think are going to be most important for Arreola. Those first few rounds, and especially the earlier rounds, the more important they'll be. Chris has a way of getting to guys, even when he doesn't look good. Even in the Kaufman fight, in that first round, Chris found ways to land punches, and he's a pretty heavy-handed dude. Wilder is going to have to prove that he could avoid that incoming fire. But I think Chris has the style that he can get to Wilder. Then what's going to happen? Is Wilder going to be able to rise to the occasion and overcome adversity? Or maybe some of the doubts a lot of people have about Wilder's punch resistance and his durability and his ability to take a punch, maybe we'll get some answers to that one way or another. I think Chris has a much better chance than people think. I think the more the fight goes on, the less that chance becomes. So I think in the first round, in the second round, and even in the 3rd round, if Chris could avoid and evade the power shots coming from Wilder, and if he could be the same type of aggressive power puncher who puts his punches together in combinations, I think he could land something early, and I think he has enough gas that he'll have a chance to do something major in the first 5 rounds again, if he can avoid the incoming fire. Logic tells me that Deontay Wilder should win this fight, but all the same, I really do believe that people are selling Arreola short and that Arreola is going to test Wilder. So, perhaps against my better judgment, for my official prediction, I'm going to take Chris Arreola by 3rd round stoppage over Deontay Wilder. I think Chris is going to get to Deontay, and I think that he's going to be more motivated, more determined. He doesn't deserve this shot. He's admitted as much, but I think he's going to try to capitalize on this situation, and we're going to see him as motivated and determined as he could be at this point. And I think stylistically, I've always thought Arreola would present more problems to Wilder than Stiverne did, and I still believe that, and even a subpar Arreola from the Kaufman fight, I think has a decent enough chance that Arreola is capable of scoring this upset. I won't be surprised if I'm wrong, I don't have a ton of confidence in this prediction, but I'm going with Arreola, and whatever happens, I hope we get an enjoyable and exciting fight that's controversy-free, where the best man wins. This is Rumsfeld. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the fight, everyone, and if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and good evening.